stories that are the most familiar to us are the ones we cannot hear. We go into it with our own motion picture in our mind of exactly what is happening and how it is happening. And we don't listen to the words that are on the page because we think we already know the answer. Anybody ever have that happen to them? Happens to me all the time. It's like, wait, stop, read, pay attention. So this is on Palm Sunday. We are at the end of our series on Genesis, the Genesis of grace. Where did grace come from? Well, it was there in the very beginning, even when we were created. We were created with God's grace. And every story that we have heard has shown how God's grace has shown up in different ways. Well, this one is one that's a little bit hard to wrap my head around. Maybe not so much for y'all because y'all are wise and kind and good. But it's about a story about some brothers that just weren't nice to one another. Just didn't like one. And I want to say it's also a story about a father who maybe he could have done some things a little differently. You see, there was this guy named Joseph. And he was one of many brothers. But he was the baby boy. And the baby boy seemed to be the apple of Daddy's eye. And he could do no wrong. And then he did that, and then Daddy did that thing that was bad, bad, bad for the kid. He showed some favoritism. And he gave that child a coat. Now some of y'all are already playing out Joseph and his Technicolor dream color. What else did I say? Amazing Technicolor dream coat. Yes, that's it. See, I don't have my words today. But you may already be playing songs in your head about that. And I know that when we were growing up, I don't know about you, but they talked about it was a coat of many colors was another way that it was spoken of, right? So we do all the stripes on the coats when we would color the color sheets in. And then when you get to be an adult, you realize it didn't have anything to do with colors. That was a translation issue. It was a coat with sleeves.
What?
A coat with sleeves. Little kids didn't get coats with sleeves. It was a big deal. He basically got a grown-up coat. If y'all didn't know that, then I need to go back and teach that lesson. Okay. And then because he got that fine coat, guess what he wanted to do? Anybody here have little brothers and sisters and you're big brothers and sisters? And I bet he wore it at every opportunity. I bet when he got up in the morning, he put on his coat. I bet it was the last thing when he got out of bed. He took off, he said, guess I better take off my coat. Let me hang up my coat. But Joseph was known not only for being a favorite in that way, but Joseph was what we call a dreamer. And there's nothing wrong with being a dreamer, being a person who sees more than what's just around them. But a dreamer that sees maybe the possibility of what can be. But sometimes when Joseph would share his stories, it didn't go over too well with his brothers. So, let's see, where do I want to start? Okay. I'm in chapter 37 of Genesis, beginning with verse 5. One night Joseph had a dream. And when he told his brothers about it, they hated him even more than ever. Listen to this dream, he said. We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain, and suddenly my bundle stood up, and your bundles all gathered around me, and they bowed low before mine. I'm sure that made them happy. His brothers responded, "So you think you'll be our king, do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. Soon, Joseph had another dream. And again, he told his brothers about it because he was the little brother who just couldn't keep his mouth shut. He said, "Listen, I had another dream. The sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed low before me." And this time he told the dream to his father as well as his brothers. But his father scolded him. "What kind of a dream is that?" he asked. "Do you think that your mother and I and your brothers will actually come and bow to the ground before you?" But while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father wondered, what do these dreams mean? Now y'all may know what happens after this. The brothers have just had too much. And they've decided they need to take matters into their own hands. So let's pray before I keep going. Gracious God, we have heard your word. Speak to our hearts. Help us to hear your message for each of us this day. Amen. Well, if you've ever had a sibling that likes to brag, it didn't go over well with the brothers. First, there was the coat. Then there he was, snooty with his dreams about how he was going to be better than them and they were going to bow down to him. I mean, anybody could read those signs. And then they did more than what we used to do. When I was growing up, when Mom and Dad went around, we just beat the tar out of each other. We would just pummel each other. That's what we did. We'd lock each other. I'd lock them out of the house. They'd lock me out of the house. We do all those kinds of things. But they were a little more angry than that. And they said, "We've had enough of this little brother. It's time to get him out of the picture." And they were so angry that they plotted to kill him. That's a lot of anger. That's a lot of anger. And I would imagine that wasn't the kind of thing that just showed up quickly. That was years upon years upon years. I think that said that when he was having his dreams, that he was about 17 years old. 17 years of being prodded by your little brother. 17 years of watching Dad give him more and treat him better than the rest of us. 17 years of seeing him getting special favors while we have to go out into the field and deal with the sheep. And we have to shear the sheep and we have to do the work. And he's just always out here flitting and skipping around. And they were done. But one of the brothers, if you remember the story, one of the brothers didn't want to kill his brother. What he wanted to do is he wanted to save his brother and then go back and win his father's affection. Look what I did. We thought he was dead, but he really was alive. But so what they did was they took that coat with the sleeves and they put some goat's blood on it, whatever, just some blood on it, animal blood on it. They took it back to their dad. They took him and they tossed him in basically an empty well. And they took the coat off of him and they covered it with blood and they took it to his dad and they said, "Dad, it looks like an animal got our little brother. Isn't this terrible?" And of course, their father grieved. Jacob was sorrowful at the loss of this youngest child. This child granted to him in his old age. Child by his favorite wife. But what happens next kind of messed up everybody's plans. Because when one brother had one plan, he didn't tell the other 10 brothers about what was going on. The 10 said, "Hey, let's sell him. We'll get a little money for him." Because they saw a caravan go through, so they sold him into slavery. And then when the other brother came back to release him and to save him, he found him gone. And that's all we know about that. We don't know what kind of conversation went on after that, but that's what happened between the brothers. And they never saw him again. So he was as good as dead, but they didn't have to feel quite as bad. He wasn't like really dead. He was just out of the picture now, and they didn't have to deal with him. And then if you've paid attention to your VBS and your Sunday school lessons, you know that he became a valued servant in the house of Potiphar. Y'all remember Potiphar? Y'all remember that word? No? Okay. Potiphar was one of the most trusted people of Pharaoh. He was like the governor of the area. So Joseph was so dependable that he quickly rose in ranks and became very trusted. He ran Potiphar's household for him. And Potiphar's wife saw this cute little guy, and she decided she wanted to have a little fun. And when he refused, he literally ran away. When he refused, she accused him of rape. And he was immediately thrown into jail and forgotten. 2 times he goes down into a well and he's forgotten. And while he's down there, he's actually kind of making friends in the jail. And he meets some other people that have been thrown into jail. But the thing that happens is he begins to interpret dreams. God gives him the ability to interpret dreams of people that are there. Dreams that, unfortunately for some, come true. Fortunately for some and unfortunately for others. But as he is in this place, we see a man who at least twice has been thrown to the very lowest possible low and rises. A second time, he will rise and he will become second only to Pharaoh. And at that point in the story, when he rises, he makes it out of prison because he is able to interpret Pharaoh's dream, and he runs the country. He runs the entire country and takes them through a time of bountiful years and then through a time of famine where other countries are having to come and to get their resources from them. Those brothers that threw him in a well so long ago show up. And they don't recognize him. They probably don't even look directly at him. But Joseph recognizes him. And when he had the opportunity to absolutely take them out, what does he do? He shows them mercy. Now there's a little intrigue that goes on there. But he shows them mercy. See, he had a dream and it really was true. There did come a time when they did bow down to him. There was a time when they gathered round him and acknowledged that he was over them. Funny thing about dreams, they don't always happen on our timeline. Sometimes they happen on others. And the ability for a dreamer is to imagine more than what they can currently see. Now, there's a song called Imagine that is one of my favorites. Y'all remember that? If I'd have told them, they could have sang that for you today. Some of them could probably break into song right now. But it says to imagine all the people. To imagine what can be. What dreams can be. Even Disney's in on it. Disney says that a dream is the wish the heart makes. But what is a dream? For Martin Luther King, he dreamed of a time and a place where people could see everyone around them as another person, not based on the color of their skin, not to become a country of haves and have-nots. And he was a man who had a dream, and he was penalized for his dream as well as because he was assassinated. He was a man that didn't see his dream come to fruition. But he was the impetus of a dream that began to transform a country and to be more than what it was. Joseph was a man who listened to God's dream, and he became more than what it seemed like he was. One of the things that surprises me is that God will use, if we make ourselves available to God, if we say, okay, God, I don't know what to do with this, I have this urge, I have this feeling, I have whatever, I don't know what to do with it. But if we give it to God, we will find that God will take us to places that we never even dreamed of. He will give us the ability to do things that we never even thought we were capable of. But we have to be open and we have to offer it to them. I believe that Joseph was open. He said these dreams came from God. He always acknowledged when he interpreted the dreams, he says, I will tell you what God tells me to tell you. I believe Martin Luther King Jr. was trying to share something that he believed that God had told him, is that we were all created equal. I think it's in this thing called the Declaration of Independence, Constitution of the United States. He believed. And I guess my question for us is, what do we believe? Do we believe that it's possible to love others? Do we believe that God has the ability to continue to work? Do we believe we can even dream anymore of what can be? Well, one of the first steps to dreaming is you've got to clear a lot of baggage out of your life for that dream to come true. You have to do some forgiveness. Joseph could have taken the life and the hand that he had been dealt, and he could have been bitter forever. He had reason. He'd been betrayed by his family. He'd been betrayed by his friends in jail. He'd been betrayed by his boss's wife. He had plenty of reasons to be angry, but he chose not to be. He chose to keep himself focused on God. There's a story about the family of some English officials, and they were in Afghanistan. Current situation. And while they were there, they said that they kept a diary they had a prayer book, and they kept a diary of their experiences, and they would write it in the margins of the prayer book. There were 3 officials that were there, these 3 British officers. And one day, their captors came and took 2 of them outside and said, dig a couple of holes. And those officers dug their own graves and they never came back. The 3rd officer still had the prayer book with him. And he took it home, and it made its way back into the hands of into the wife of one of the officers. And she had every opportunity to be angry and to figure out how could she do something to get even with what had happened to her husband. But she decided that she would live and react from a place of mercy. So what she did is she contacted folks in India who were running a hospital. And she paid for a hospital that would always have room for an Afghan soldier. And that he would always have treatment as it was needed. Because you see, they didn't really want to treat the Afghans. But to honor her husband and his friend's memory, she realized the only way she could move forward was to show mercy and to show forgiveness. The only way Joseph was able to move forward was to show mercy and show forgiveness. The only way we as a country have even begun to move forward somewhat in the midst of all that's going on is when we show mercy and offer forgiveness. Where are we in that place in our lives? Where are we in how we live out what's going on and what's done to us and what's done around us and what's going on around us? Are we living lives of mercy and forgiveness? Because let me tell you something, folks. You may say that this is not the way something should be, but when God says this is how it's going to end, it's going to end that way either with or without you. It's what they call providence. The providence of Joseph was he did become a ruler over his people. Providence of Martin Luther King was a young minister. Did become somebody who began a movement in our country so that we can see that we are all unique children of God. How are we living our lives so that God's movement can happen through us? How are we living our lives so that God's creation continues to exist in a way that makes a difference? I don't know how many times I sit and I talk to people and they say, it really doesn't matter, Kathy, because there's nothing that I do, nothing you can say that will ever make a difference. My friends, each one of us has a journey to take. And each one of us has an opportunity as to how we will live out that journey. Whether we will be people who give ourselves and acknowledge that we are God's children and that we have a role to play, or we can stand up and say, no, I don't believe that way and I'm not going to be part of it. Well, that's okay. We have this guy who believes in this thing called free will. Y'all remember what I told you last week about Abraham and my seminary professor? Y'all don't remember, okay. When I was in seminary, I had a professor, he asked the question to the class. He said, what if Abraham had said no to God saying, go, take a walk, and go where I tell you to go? What if Abraham had said no? And we were perplexed. What would have happened if Abraham had said no? Because, Abraham's in the Bible. And we started debating, and finally he looked and said, he'd have found somebody else. Just wouldn't have been named Abraham. Because you see, God's will come through, often in spite of us. But how much better is it when we are part of the story? When we are part of the joy? When we are part of what makes a difference in the world around us? When we bring hope and light and forgiveness to a world that is broken and desperate. God will out. Can we walk with God? Will we allow ourselves to walk with God? Would you pray with me? Gracious God, we thank you for this day, for the way that you teach us, the way that you lead us, for how we are called to be your people. Open our hearts, Lord, and open our minds to lead as you would have us lead in this day and time. Amen.